welcome back everyone. For this segment of our training, we're going to talk about the continuum of support that PBIS offers, and then how this team is going to develop systems that are going to support your school in implementing that continuum of supports. So at this point in education, we are all used to seeing this triangle. And it's important as we're thinking about this triangle, this represents what happens at each tier. It's not people, it's what happens. And at this tier 1, this is what we do for all students. Now, this team is representative of mostly teachers. It's important to think about, or I think it's helpful actually, to think about how this connects to academics. It's something that we're really comfortable with. So if you're thinking about tier 1 supports at, say, the math level, it's the core curriculum. It's the set of lessons in the teacher's book that all students participate in. When we're talking about PBIS and the behavior section of the continuum, these are the classroom systems that we have in place, the classroom practices, the school-wide systems, the expectations that we teach children, that we reinforce for children, that is implemented by all staff for all students. When we are looking at the tier 2 level of supports, we're looking at a little bit more that some students are going to need in order to be successful and meet the expectations. So going back to that math example, we have the core lesson, say it's double-digit multiplication. Some students are going to need some small group instruction because that first lesson wasn't enough. Behaviorally, some students are going to need more than those class-wide systems, the school-wide systems. They might need some small group instruction and social skills. They might need some extra reminders about our expectations. And then finally, we're going to have a few students that need highly individualized supports. They might need additional assessments, and they need some supports that are specific just to those students. When we are looking at the triangle and you see these numbers represent the percentages, and they're approximate, the approximate percentages of students who will be successful with that level. So around 80% of our students just need the tier 1 when it's implemented well. Approximately 15% are going to need those additional supports, small group, extra reinforcement. And then about 5% are going to need that intensive level of support. We do not have tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 students. We have supports at each of these levels. And it's important to think about, if you can just think about yourself as a student, you probably looked something like this graph. Okay, there were subjects, like maybe social studies, where you were an ace. You loved it, you didn't need any extra support. Maybe the same for basketball. For me, I'm 4'10". That wouldn't be the case for me, but for some, tier 1, that's gonna be enough. For reading, maybe pretty good, but might need some extra supports. Social skills, again, generally the tier 1 is going to be enough, might need some extra reminders from time to time. This student might be a pretty early Spanish speaker, may need some extra small group instruction. And then in the area of science, maybe some extra small group instruction, as well as maybe some after school help, a little bit of extra. But in math, this student is really struggling and might need some additional assessments, possibly some specialized instruction. Okay. So you can see it's not a student is a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. It's the supports they need in whatever they're doing. So we were making that connection between the academic supports and the behavior supports. And the supports that are provided at each tier are similar in features, whether you're talking about behavior or talking about academics. Okay, so we're looking at evidence-based features, monitoring progress, making sure that we are providing tiered supports based on data. So now you as a team, one of your goals is to provide systems that are going to allow your staff to provide that continuum of supports at all three tiers. So looking at your leadership, you're going to be helping them to see where they are, see how they're performing in terms of fidelity of these supports, and then coaching them along the way. This gives you a nice visual of how, and almost how we've gotten to the point that we're at now and where we're going. People had to make decisions that this was going to be a priority, and that has happened at the upper level. Money has been designated. We know that staffing, we have the staffing. We've decided that this is an initiative that we're gonna really focus on for the entire district. At this point, you have your leadership team coming together. So you've taken that initiative, you're coming together to learn how to provide training, coaching, and evaluation of the systems that are expected. In Massachusetts, at the state level, MTSS for behavior and academics is a priority. It's an expectation for districts. So from that point, your district has a team that is putting MTSS together for behavior and academics. Now this is where myself as an external coach, I'm working with your district team. I'm also working with your team in order to develop the systems that are going to support your staff. So we're going to look at how are you going to look at data? What is your action plan? What do you have in place that's solid? What do we need to focus on in order to provide your staff with the supports they need to implement? In my providing support to you, your team in this way, you're going to develop the internal capacity to coach your school staff in implementing PBIS and all of the supports at all three tiers. And your school staff is then in turn going to provide these supports for students. Oops. So as we wrap up this section, just knowing that what's coming ahead is we're going to look at all of these systems in depth in order to make sure that your team is able to support your staff in things like, how do I recognize staff for implementing properly with fidelity? How are we going to look at data? How often? What are we going to look for? That's all coming, but at this point, we're going to take a break.